Hello everyone, just me, Jeff Donnelly, JP Donnelly 8 Instagram, JP Donnelly 8 Facebook. Got a website, it's just not up right now, but that's also, jpdonnelly8.com. But anyways, also the author of Emotion and Political Repression, a book detailing the corruption I faced while I was 25 years old, trying to run for Congress in Massachusetts. This video right here is about, it's a little bit of an update to another video that I did last week where my neighbor found a live round bullet in the driveway where I parked my car. He went to, he showed me it, and I brought it down to the police department and made a complaint that I found a bullet in my driveway where I parked my vehicle. Well, my neighbor found the bullet in my driveway where I parked my vehicle. So if you look at it, there's a long history of corruption in the local, police and judiciary, going back over 10 years. I wrote a book about it, exposing corruption. They didn't like that. I ran for mayor of Springfield. Every debate I went to, I said, how can I be suitable for a Massachusetts firearm license, but not suitable to renew my hawker business permit to sell the book I wrote? I said, corruption, I think so. They didn't like that. When my firearm license came up for renewal, 30 days prior, the district attorney's office contacted Munson PD, had them file bogus charges against me from a false allegation that was made 5 years prior. Bunch of bullshit. After my license expired, I was contacted and I was charged with refusing to turn over a firearm license when I didn't even have a firearm license. Judge gave custom jury instructions. I was found guilty based upon custom jury instructions that didn't allow them to actually prove that I had a firearm license on the day in question. Because ask yourself this: if my firearm license expired on April 24th, and they're contacting me on May 8th, telling me I've got to turn in a firearm license, I don't have a firearm license. Just like a driver's license, once it expires, it expires. But there's a lot more information with that whole case, like I'll be writing a book about that sooner or later. And they're aware that they're not happy about that either. They're also not happy that I'm trying to get copies of the recordings because the judge in this last round of them actually acted very inappropriately, made rulings that went against the Massachusetts Rules of Civil Procedure. I filed motions about that in the court while trying to get copies of the recordings, which they're refusing to provide. But anyways, so a week or so prior to this bullet being found in my driveway was when I made these complaints against the judge and these requests for documentation. So if you look at it, if a different neighbor would have saw the ammunition, the single round of ammunition in my driveway, would have contacted the police, are you telling me that the police wouldn't have applied for a warrant for my arrest? I'm going to guarantee you they would have applied for a warrant for my arrest, because it was a round of ammunition. And if you look at it, right now they're saying that they're denying me my firearm license because I have a firearm or ammunition related offense. They're not happy because my offense, the jury clearly stated it was a firearm license offense. It was a licensing offense, not a firearm or ammunition related offense. They're not happy about that. So a neighbor finding a bullet in the driveway right where I parked my vehicle would have given them ammunition, no pun intended, well, maybe pun intended, who the hell knows, to actually file charges against that right there against me. But thank God it was a neighbor that actually likes me who actually knocked on the door and actually provided it. Or if it wasn't a setup, it was a direct threat against my life for exposing corruption. I'm not wearing a tinfoil hat, plain and simple, but at the same time, anyone has to actually look at it as the facts that are in the matter, all right? Right where I park in the driveway was a bullet. Right in the center of the driveway. Not on the side, not in the grass, not in the dirt, but right in the middle of the driveway, right on the blacktop, right where I park. It's either a setup or a direct threat. What else could it be? Didn't come from me. And on top of it, It definitely wasn't in my car from when I had my firearm license and my firearms, and I'll tell you exactly why. When I'd go target shooting, I'd bring my 38 specials. I didn't bring my 9mm, and this was a 9mm round. So I'd bring my 38 specials, revolvers, or I'd bring a 22 caliber handgun. I really wasn't bringing my 9s out. Maybe once in a blue moon. But still, it was found in the middle of the driveway, not on the side or anything else. And anyone that knows anything about firearms would know that if you're bringing a 9mm out, you're going to put the ammunition in the magazine. You're not going to just like walk around with a handful of like rounds loose. Rounds in the magazine, magazine in the firearm. So for a 9mm round to actually be in the driveway like that means that it's definitely intentional. So what is it? Are they threatening me without coming up and threatening me? Because remember, they've actually threatened me before. I've had a random person, white male, nondescript, after I lost my appeal in the appellate court, telling me not to file higher, threatening me with a January 6th charge by telling me, wouldn't it be horrible if you were charged with a January 6th offense? It's like, I wasn't in Washington, D.C. I had nothing to do with January 6th. But the person actually stating that to me, I understood what it was. I understood what happened with the appellate's court, which another book is in the process about that whole ordeal. Actually, 2 separate books are in the process with that whole ordeal. Because remember, with that whole case is, in the appellate court, they did not give me the ability for oral arguments, and the district attorney's office clearly stated that they didn't have to notify me that my license was suspended, which goes against what the law actually states in that case too. But remember, it was an unpublished opinion. Why? Because they didn't want to make it a published opinion, because then more people would actually be aware of that case's case law. You know, we're living in a very horrible, very dangerous time. And when a person who used to work for the system, I used to work for the Massachusetts Department of Youth Services as the U.S. prison guard. I was with the Springfield Park Rangers for a little while. I've done private security, I've done personal security, I've been a bouncer, I've done all that shit. When someone who actually, I've got degrees in psychology and criminal justice, when someone who actually works in the field, works in the industry, falls victim to political and judicial corruption, it's ridiculous. Because unlike a lot of people, I'm lucky that I've actually know the ability to actually look at the law and read the law and dissect the law and dissect paperwork, statements, and everything else. Because if it wasn't for that, I would have been nailed over 10 years ago with these false cases and everything else. But because I know my shit, what happens? They pull bullshit, they file false charges, I go to court, I beat the shit out of them, I win. Up until this last case where the judge made custom jury instructions which did not require the Commonwealth to prove that I had a firearm license. Because remember something, my gun license expired on April 24th. They contacted me on May 8th telling me to turn in my firearm license. I didn't have a firearm license. If the Commonwealth of Massachusetts would have had to actually prove that on May 8th I had a firearm license, they could not prove that. And you know why? Listen to some of the other videos I have of my cross-examination of Deputy Stephen Kent. He even admitted that I did not have a firearm license on that day in question. But the judge did not require the state to prove that I had a gun license. All they had to prove is I refused to turn over a firearm license. Well, if they're not required to prove I had a valid one, and I'm refusing to meet with them, obviously I'm nailed, even though I didn't have a firearm license. Deputy Chief Kent actually testified to that in trial. Listen to the video, you'll see it. And remember something. With my appeal going on right now, with the firearm license situation, trying to get it back. They're claiming that I got found guilty of a firearm or ammunition-related offense. My offense I got found guilty of, the jury made clear what it was. I was not found guilty of refusing to turn over a firearm. I was not found guilty of refusing to turn over even one round of ammunition. I was found guilty for the simple fact of refusing to turn over a firearm license at a time that I didn't even have a firearm license. So ask yourself this. If you're driving down the road and you get pulled over and your driver's license expired the day before, you're guilty of driving without a license because you don't have a license. If you actually go into a bar or a liquor store to buy a beer, a shot of Jameson, shot of Jack Daniels, Budweiser, Bud Light, if you're into that shit, any of that shit, right? What happens? By law, they can't serve you because you don't have a valid license. You no longer have a license because it expired the day before. If you want to cash in a scratch ticket and you hand them an expired license, they can't cash that in. If you go to a state building or a federal courthouse and you hand them an expired license, you can't enter because it's not valid for identification because it's expired. You don't have a license anymore. You don't have a form of valid identification anymore. So if your firearm license expires, you no longer have a firearm license. If they would have caught me with an expired license with a firearm, I would have been charged with carrying a firearm without a license. Yet, about 3 weeks later, 2 weeks later, after it expired, I get charged with refusing to turn over a firearm license when they called me up, telling me it was suspended. How the hell can you suspend a license that doesn't exist anymore? You can not renew it, but you can't suspend it. And on top of it, Massachusetts general law clearly states how one goes about suspending a firearm license, and that is this. If you don't believe me, read the law. It has to be in writing, has to tell the person why it's being suspended, and has to give the person the ability to appeal the decision in court. Well, guess what? They provided me with that. You'll watch the video if you want of when I went down to the police headquarters. And guess what? That's when they actually served me with that in writing. And that was after I was arrested and charged with refusing to turn over a firearm license. Once again, after my license had been suspended. Well, I mean, not even. After my firearm license had expired. That's when I was served with a suspension. Deputy Chief Kent admitted to this even in trial. Watch the video. So once again, this is either a direct threat against my life for making the complaint against the judge, or a setup to file charges against me for an ammunition-related offense. That way, they can have justification to deny me my license by having an ammunition-related offense. Okay, once again, Jeff Donnelly, author of Emotion and Political Repression, True Tale of Massachusetts Bohemian, which is a journal detailing the corruption I faced while running for Congress in Massachusetts. They don't like when you actually stand up against them. The powerful people in Massachusetts do not like when the little guy fights back. And I'm the little guy. Okay. Have a good night. Well, have a great day. Enjoy your time.